My name is Santiago, and I was 18 when my world collapsed. In our middle-class home in Arizona, I had done everything right. 3 years of part-time jobs and scholarships had built my college fund to $28,800, just enough to chase my dreams. Then one morning, it vanished. My parents emptied my account to save my brother Damien from prison. Before I continue this story about the most painful betrayal of my life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button if you want more real-life stories that might just change how you see family loyalty. I always believed that hard work would lead to success. That was my formula. Study hard, stay focused, and opportunities would follow. By senior year, I had maintained a 3.9 GPA while working 20 hours weekly at Northside Books, our local bookstore. My advanced placement classes in biology and chemistry were stepping stones toward my dream of becoming a doctor. Every teacher knew me as the quiet kid with big ambitions, not the type to party on weekends or get into trouble. My best friend Brian Wilson had been by my side since 3rd grade when he defended me against bullies who mocked my secondhand clothes. He came from a wealthier family, but never once made me feel less than. We'd spend weekends studying together, occasionally sneaking in video game breaks when the equations became too overwhelming. Brian was headed to Princeton with a full scholarship, while I had secured partial funding at the University of Arizona. "You've earned this, Santiago," he told me when my acceptance letter arrived. "Nobody worked harder than you." At the bookstore, I shelved medical textbooks with reverence, occasionally flipping through anatomy diagrams during my breaks. My manager, Mrs. Lawson, would smile knowingly. "Studying on your 15-minute break again? That dedication will take you far." Every dollar I earned went straight into my college fund. No movies, no new clothes, no expensive dinners. Just saving, calculating, and planning. $28,800 represented 1,440 hours of work, countless sacrificed weekends, and 3 years of determination. Home was a modest 4-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. My father, Travis, worked as a structural engineer at a local firm. He was tall with graying temples, a man of few words but firm principles. Dinner conversations often centered around his expectations for his sons. "Education first, everything else second," he would say between bites of whatever my mother had prepared. His own father had worked in construction without a degree, and he was determined his sons would have better opportunities. My mother, Eleanor, taught 3rd grade at Pinewood Elementary. She had gentle hands and tired eyes, always marking papers at the kitchen table late into the evening. While Dad set high standards, Mom was our emotional support. "Just do your best," she would whisper, when Dad's expectations felt overwhelming. She worked extra summer school sessions to contribute to our college funds, never complaining about the additional hours. Then there was Damien, my older brother by 7 years. Growing up, I idolized him. He had been the high school valedictorian, basketball team captain, and recipient of a scholarship to UCLA. Old trophies still lined our hallway, dusty reminders of his former glory. But something changed during his college years. He returned for holidays with bloodshot eyes and quick temper. His calls home became infrequent, and when he did call, he often asked for money for textbooks or lab fees. After graduation, Damien moved back home, supposedly to save money before law school. But months passed, with no applications submitted. Instead, he took a sales job he clearly hated, coming home late, smelling of whiskey. My parents made excuses. "He's finding himself," or "it's just post-graduation blues." I watched their worried glances when they thought no one was looking. The distance between us grew. Where once Damien had helped with my homework, now he barely acknowledged my existence. Still playing the perfect son? He once sneered when I was studying for finals. The brother I had admired had become a stranger in our house. My college plans had been carefully calculated. The University of Arizona had offered a scholarship covering 60% of my tuition. The remaining costs for tuition, books, housing, and living expenses over 4 years would require $28,800. I had saved precisely that amount, planning to the last dollar. "You'll be the first Dr. Martinez in the family," Mom would say proudly, ignoring Damien's eye rolls. The first signs of trouble appeared subtly. Hushed phone conversations between my parents that abruptly ended when I entered the room. Dad's sudden interest in checking the mail before anyone else could. Mom's red-rimmed eyes at breakfast. Then Damien suddenly appeared at Sunday dinner, unusual since he typically avoided family meals. His designer watch was missing, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Throughout dinner, my parents exchanged meaningful glances, while Damien pushed food around his plate. "Everything okay?" I asked, sensing the tension. "Just fine," Dad snapped, uncharacteristically harsh. "Eat your dinner." Later that night, raised voices drifted from the kitchen. I caught fragments. "How could you be so irresponsible?" From Mom, and Damien's defensive? It wasn't my fault. Something was clearly wrong, but I was kept in the dark. With college orientation just weeks away, I focused on preparing for my future. Little did I know that my carefully built plans were already crumbling. The truth revealed itself in pieces, like a puzzle I never wanted to solve. It was a Tuesday night in July when I overheard the conversation that would change everything. I had returned from my evening shift at the bookstore, intending to grab a snack before bed. As I approached the kitchen, my father's voice stopped me cold. $25,000 for the attorney, plus another $5,000 for the expert witness, he was saying. "We don't have that kind of money, Damien." I froze in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall. "What choice do I have?" Damien's voice cracked. "You want me to go to prison? Is that what you want?" My mother's sob punctuated the silence that followed. "Of course not. But where are we supposed to find $30,000 in 2 weeks?" I should have walked away. Instead, I remained rooted to the spot as the horrifying story unfolded. Damien had been driving home from a casino, intoxicated after a night of heavy losses. He ran a red light and collided with another vehicle. The driver, a 26-year-old woman named Jessica Fisher, suffered multiple fractures and internal bleeding. She was still in the hospital. "They're charging me with DUI causing serious bodily injury," Damien explained, his voice hollow. "It's a felony, if she doesn't make it." "Don't say that," Mom interrupted. "She's going to recover. The public defender says I'm looking at 3 to 7 years minimum," Damien continued. "But Alan Richardson could get it reduced to probation. He's handled cases like this before." Alan Richardson was a prominent defense attorney known for his expensive fees and impressive record of reducing sentences for wealthy clients. His billboards lined the interstate, promising second chances when you need them most. "We'll figure something out," Dad said firmly. "We always do." I retreated silently to my room, my appetite forgotten. That night, I lay awake, processing what I'd heard. My brother had nearly killed someone. He might go to prison. My parents were desperate. The following days brought more hushed conversations and closed doors. I tried to focus on preparing for college, but the tension in our home was suffocating. When I asked direct questions about Damien's situation, I received vague answers. "Just some legal trouble," Dad would say. "Nothing for you to worry about." But I did worry. I worried about the woman in the hospital. I worried about my brother facing prison. Mostly, I worried about the desperate look in my parents' eyes. A week later, the situation worsened. Mom received a call at dinner and stepped outside to take it. When she returned, her face was ashen. "Jessica's condition has deteriorated," she whispered to Dad. "They're saying there might be permanent damage to her spine." The news hit our family like a tsunami. Damien locked himself in his room with a bottle of bourbon. Dad paced the living room until past midnight, making calls to relatives. Mom sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. The charges against Damien were upgraded to include reckless endangerment. His potential prison sentence increased to 5 to 10 years. The urgency to secure a top attorney became even greater. I found my father at the dining room table late one night, surrounded by bank statements and calculator printouts. He quickly shuffled the papers when he noticed me. "Just working on some finances," he said with forced casualness. "Shouldn't you be asleep? Big day tomorrow." I nodded and retreated, but not before noticing the statement from Arizona Federal Credit Union among his papers. My bank, where my college fund was stored. The next morning, I overheard my parents in their bedroom. "We've gone through all our options," Dad was saying. "The home equity line was denied. Your parents can only spare $5,000. My 401k has penalties if we withdraw early." "What about Santiago's college fund?" Mom suggested, her voice barely audible. My heart stopped. "He worked so hard for that money," Dad replied, but his tone lacked conviction. Damien's facing prison. Travis. Years of his life gone. Santiago can take a gap year, reapply for scholarships. We'll pay him back. And if we can't? We don't have a choice. I backed away from their door, nausea rising in my throat. They couldn't possibly be considering this. Not after everything I'd sacrificed. Not after all their speeches about education and responsibility. That afternoon, I called my bank to check my balance, a habit I'd developed over years of careful saving. The automated system reported, "Your current balance is $12.33. There must be a mistake," I thought frantically. I asked to speak with a representative. "Yes, Mr. Martinez. There was a withdrawal of $28,787.67 yesterday," the banker explained. "The transaction was processed at our Highland branch. Is there a problem?" My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor of my bedroom. Yesterday, while I was working my shift at the bookstore, someone had emptied my account. Someone with access. Someone I trusted. I sat there for hours, clutching my phone, waiting for my parents to return home. The betrayal burned through my chest like acid, dissolving everything I thought I knew about family and trust. The house was unusually quiet when my parents finally returned. Through the living room window, I watched them sit in the driveway for several minutes, heads bent in conversation. They looked exhausted, older somehow. In any other circumstance, I might have felt sympathy. Not today. I was waiting at the kitchen table when they entered. My bank statement lay before me like evidence at a trial. Mom saw it first, her hand flying to her mouth. "Santiago," she began, but I cut her off. $28,787.67, I said, my voice eerily calm. "Every penny I've saved since sophomore year. Gone." Dad set his keys down carefully. "We were going to talk to you about this tonight." "After you'd already taken it?" The calm was fracturing now, my voice rising. "After you emptied my account without even asking me?" "We had no choice," Mom pleaded, dropping into the chair across from me. Damien needed the money for his lawyer. The retainer was due today, or Alan Richardson wouldn't take his case. And my future? What about the plans we've been talking about for years? My medical school dreams? Did those matter at all? Dad straightened his shoulders, slipping into the authoritative role he'd perfected over years. "Of course they matter. But this is an emergency, Santiago. Your brother is facing prison. Real prison. Years of his life gone. Because of his choices," I countered. "Because he got drunk, gambled away his money, and nearly killed someone." "He made a mistake," Mom interjected. "A terrible mistake. But he's still your brother. And I'm still your son." I slammed my palm against the table, making them both flinch. Or at least, I thought I was. "You can defer enrollment for a year," Dad explained, his voice maddeningly reasonable. "Work, save up again. We'll help you this time." "Like you helped Damien?" I laughed bitterly. "How's that working out?" "This isn't like you, Santiago," Mom said, tears streaming down her face. "You've always been understanding, compassionate. You've always been trustworthy," I shot back. "Guess we're both discovering new things today." The front door opened, and Damien strolled in, seemingly oblivious to the storm raging in the kitchen. He looked better than he had in weeks, relief evident in his posture. "Richardson says we've got a solid chance at a plea deal," he announced before noticing me. "What's going on? They told you where the money came from?" I asked him directly. He hesitated, glancing at our parents. "They said they'd handle the finances. It was my college fund, Damien. Every dollar I've saved for the past 3 years." Something flickered across his face. Regret, perhaps. Or shame, but it vanished quickly. "Look, I'm sorry about that, but this is serious. I could go to prison, and I could have become a doctor." I stood up slowly. "But I guess only one of us matters in this family." "That's not true," Dad protested. "We'll figure something out for you too." "Like what?" I challenged. "Are you going to take out a second mortgage, cash in your retirement? Or just wait until Damien needs bailing out again, and I'm back at square one?" "That's not fair," Mom whispered. "None of this is fair," I shouted, years of pent-up frustration finally breaking free. I did everything right. I worked while maintaining straight A's. I saved when Damien spent. I stayed out of trouble while he created it. And my reward? Having my future stolen by the people who were supposed to protect it? Damien scoffed. Always the perfect son, right? Saint Santiago never makes mistakes. Mistakes? I turned to him, incredulous. You almost killed someone, Damien. That's not a mistake, that's a crime. And now I'm paying for it. We'll pay you back, Dad insisted. Every penny. When? I demanded. After you've covered Damien's legal fees? After you've paid the civil settlement that's surely coming? After you've supported him during probation because no decent company will hire him now? Their silence confirmed what I already knew. There would be no repayment. At least not anytime soon. Not when their firstborn needed them. I've made a decision, I said finally. I'm leaving. What? Mom looked panicked. Where would you go? College starts in 3 weeks. Not for me, it doesn't. I headed for my bedroom. Not anymore. I pulled my 2 largest duffel bags from the closet and began methodically packing my belongings. Clothes, electronics, important documents. The framed photo of my high school graduation remained on the nightstand, my parents beaming proudly on either side of me, a lie captured in pixels. Mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes red and swollen. Please don't do this, Santiago. We can work something out. You already worked something out, I replied, without looking up. Without me. Dad joined her, his face grave. Son, I understand you're upset. You have every right to be. But running away won't solve anything. I'm not running away, I corrected him. I'm starting over. Something I now have to do because of your choices. Where will you go? Mom's voice cracked. I'll figure it out. Just as I'd figured out how to save $28,800 on minimum wage. Just as I'd figured out how to balance work and academics. Just as I'd have to figure out an entirely new future now. Damien appeared behind them, leaning against the wall with forced casualness. You're being dramatic. People take gap years all the time. I zipped my bags closed and turned to face my family, these strangers I no longer recognized. A gap year is a choice. This was theft. We're your parents, Dad said, his voice rising. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions for the family. You made a decision for Damien. I corrected him. And against me. I shouldered past them, bags in hand, heading for the front door. Mom followed, crying openly now. Please don't go, she begged. Not like this. I paused at the door, turning back one last time. You chose him over me. Now you can live with that choice. As I walked away from the only home I'd ever known, carrying everything I owned in 2 bags, I heard my mother sobbing behind me. My father called my name once, twice, then fell silent. Damien never said a word. I didn't look back. The first night away from home, I slept on Brian's couch, staring at his living room ceiling until dawn broke. His parents welcomed me without questions, but I could sense their concern in the extra pancakes at breakfast and the careful way they avoided mentioning my family. Stay as long as you need, Mrs. Wilson insisted, squeezing my shoulder. We have plenty of room. But Charity, however well-intentioned, felt suffocating. By day 3, I was scrolling through apartment listings, calculating monthly expenses against my meager savings. The math was brutal. Without my college fund, I couldn't afford tuition, let alone housing and living expenses. On day 4, I called the University of Arizona admissions office to defer my enrollment. The sympathetic administrator promised to hold my spot for 1 year, but warned my scholarship wouldn't be guaranteed upon return. Another dream deferred. Brian tried to help. My parents could loan you the money, he suggested, as we shot baskets in his driveway. I'm done taking money from other people's parents, I replied, missing an easy layup. Even when they're offering freely, finding work became my obsession. I submitted applications to every restaurant, retail store, and warehouse within 10 miles. By week's end, I had secured a position as a server at Harlow's, an upscale steakhouse downtown. The manager, Anthony, was a burly former Marine with a straight-talking approach that I immediately respected. I don't care about your family drama, he told me during the interview. I care if you show up on time and work hard. Can you do that? Yes, sir, I replied, grateful for the lack of sympathy. My first apartment was a studio above a laundromat, with pipes that groaned all night and a shower that never quite got hot. The rent consumed half my monthly income, but it was mine. No shared space, no obligation, no one to disappoint or be disappointed by. Those first months were a lesson in solitude. While friends posted college move-in photos on social media, I worked double shifts, volunteering for every holiday no one else wanted. Tips filled a new savings account, but the progress was painfully slow. At this rate, rebuilding my college fund would take years, not months. The holidays arrived with an awkward silence. Mom left tearful voicemails that I couldn't bring myself to return. Dad sent a check that I mailed back uncashed. Damien never reached out at all. Anthony noticed my increased hours during Christmas week. Family trouble? He asked as we closed up one night. Something like that, I replied, wiping down tables. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Got family trouble myself. Haven't spoken to my brother in 8 years. Does it get easier? I asked. Not easier. Different. He locked the restaurant door behind us. Look, you're a smart kid. Too smart to be slinging steaks for the next 40 years. Got any plans beyond this? I shrugged. Save enough to go back to school eventually. Eventually is a dangerous word, Santiago. Means sometime never. He pulled out his wallet and handed me a business card. My buddy runs the recruitment office downtown. Military put me through college. Could do the same for you. I stared at the card, Marine Corps logo gleaming under the streetlight. I never considered the military. Consider it now, Anthony said simply. 4 years of service. Then the GI Bill for education. Beats waiting tables while your dreams collect dust. That night, I researched military benefits until my eyes burned. The GI Bill would cover tuition and housing during college. The training could provide valuable skills. The structure might fill the void left by my fractured family. 2 weeks later, I walked into the recruitment office Anthony had recommended. The recruiter, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, asked straightforward questions about my goals and background. When I explained my situation, the stolen college fund, the broken family ties, he nodded without judgment. The Army isn't a backup plan or a punishment, he clarified. It's a commitment, one that rewards discipline and hard work. Sounds like you've got both. 3 months later, I said goodbye to Brian, the only friend who had stood by me through everything. Don't get shot, he joked, hugging me tightly. And write sometimes, okay? I will, I promised, though we both knew our paths were diverging permanently. Basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia, was every bit as challenging as I'd expected. The physical demands were brutal 5-mile runs before dawn, obstacle courses that tested every muscle, drill sergeants who accepted nothing less than perfection. But the mental adjustment was harder. Learning to function as part of a unit rather than an individual. Taking orders without question. Building trust with strangers who became closer than family. In my squad, I met Marcus, a former gang member from Detroit, seeking a new start, and Ryan, a pastor's son from Nebraska, who could recite Bible verses during 20-mile marches. Different backgrounds, different reasons for enlisting, but united by the same uniform and purpose. Family issues, huh? Marcus asked one night as we polished boots. Join the club, man. Haven't talked to my pops since I was 14. At least yours had a reason to take your money, Ryan added. Mine gambled away my college fund on fantasy football leagues, called it investing in our future. Their stories made mine seem less unique, less personal somehow. We were all running from something, or toward something better. During the rare moments of free time, I wrote letters to Brian, describing the intensity of training and the unexpected brotherhood I'd found. I never mentioned my family, and he never asked. Some wounds were still too fresh to probe. After basic training came advanced individual training, where I specialized in finance. The irony wasn't lost on me learning to manage large sums of money after having my own savings stolen. But I discovered an aptitude for numbers and systems that earned recognition from instructors. Private Martinez has exceptional attention to detail, my evaluation read. Recommended for accelerated promotion upon completion of training. 4 months into my service, I received my first promotion to Private First Class. The small ceremony involved a new patch and handshakes from commanding officers. No family members in attendance, but my unit stood proudly behind me, a different kind of support system. My first deployment came 8 months later, a 9-month tour managing logistics for a base in South Korea. The distance provided perspective. Halfway across the world, surrounded by soldiers who depended on my accuracy with supply chains and budget allocations, my family drama seemed smaller, less defining. I sent a single postcard home that year, addressed to both parents. I'm safe, doing well. Santiago. No return address, no invitation to respond, just proof of survival. By the end of my second year of service, I had been promoted again and assigned to Fort Hamilton in New York. My savings account had grown steadily, untouched by family emergencies or brothers' mistakes. I enrolled in evening classes at a community college, using military tuition assistance to begin working toward a business degree. The trajectory of my life had changed completely from the medical career I'd once envisioned. Yet somehow, the detour felt right. The discipline of military service had rebuilt my confidence. The distance had healed some of the rawness of betrayal. The independence had taught me self-reliance beyond what any college experience might have offered. Ever think about re-enlisting? My commanding officer asked during an evaluation. You've got leadership potential, Martinez. Could go far in this organization. I considered it seriously. The military had become comfortable, predictable, but something inside reminded me this was meant to be a means to an end, not the end itself. I appreciate that, sir, I replied. But I have other goals once my 4 years are complete. Goals that had evolved from those of the betrayed 18-year-old who had enlisted. Goals shaped by experience, rather than expectation. And for the first time in years, goals untethered from family approval or disappointment. The day I received my honorable discharge papers, I stood outside Fort Hamilton feeling both accomplished and adrift. 4 years of structured military life had transformed me from a heartbroken teenager into a disciplined, confident man. My service record included 2 promotions, multiple commendations, and specialized training in financial operations that would translate well to civilian careers. More importantly, I had the GI Bill my ticket back to education, but my aspirations had shifted during those years. Medicine no longer called to me. Instead, I enrolled at Columbia University, using my military benefits to pursue a degree in finance and investment management. The same skills that had helped me manage military resources could build wealth and security in the private sector. College at 23 felt different than it would have at 18. While other students struggled with newfound independence, I approached my education with military precision. Study schedules, efficient note-taking systems, networking with intentionality. I treated my degree like another mission to accomplish. Professor Harrington, my financial markets instructor, took notice. Most students your age are still figuring out how to do their laundry regularly, she remarked after I submitted a particularly thorough analysis. Where did you learn this level of discipline? The Army has a way of instilling habits, I replied with a small smile. Well, those habits will serve you well in finance. This industry rewards structured thinking and attention to detail. She was right. During campus recruitment events, financial firms showed particular interest in my military background. Where other students had summer internships, I had managed multi-million-dollar supply budgets in high-pressure environments. We like veterans, said the recruiter from Morgan Stanley. You understand hierarchy, deadlines, and consequences better than most candidates straight out of school. I accepted a position at Westfield Capital, a boutique investment firm in San Francisco, 3 months before graduation. The starting salary was triple what I'd earned in the military, with bonus structures that could multiply it further based on performance. My 18-year-old self would never have imagined this path, yet it felt right. San Francisco offered anonymity and reinvention. In a city of transplants, no one questioned my lack of family visits or holiday plans. My colleagues knew me only as Santiago Martinez, the ex-military analyst with exceptional forecasting skills. The betrayed son and forgotten brother existed only in my private thoughts. Success came quickly. My military-honed work ethic stood out in an industry where 18-hour days were common, but efficiency was not. I developed a reputation for thorough research and calculated risk assessments that consistently outperformed market benchmarks. Martinez doesn't sleep became a running joke at the office. He just powers down to conserve energy. By 28, I had been promoted 3 times and accumulated enough savings to purchase a modest condominium in the Marina District. The down payment, exactly $28,800, felt like reclaiming something that had been taken from me. A symbolic victory a decade in the making. My personal life remained intentionally uncomplicated. I dated occasionally, but avoided deep commitments. Trust came slowly, if at all. Friends were carefully selected colleagues or fellow veterans who respected boundaries without question. No one knew my full story. No one needed to. Then came the call that collapsed the careful separation between past and present. Santiago? It's Brian Wilson. The voice transported me instantly back to basketball games in driveways and late-night study sessions. We had maintained sporadic contact over the years. Birthday texts, occasional social media comments, but nothing substantial. Brian. It's been a while. I stepped away from my office window, where the San Francisco skyline sparkled in the dusk. Everything okay? Yes, and no. He hesitated. I ran into your mom yesterday at Northside Market. My stomach tightened. And? She looks rough, man. Really rough. Another pause. Your dad retired early because of heart problems. They're struggling. I'm sorry to hear that, I said automatically, surprised to find I meant it. But I'm not sure why you're calling me about this. Because Damien is out of prison. The words hit like a physical blow. Prison? He actually went to prison? 4 years for the DUI and assault. He got released 6 months ago. Brian's voice softened. That fancy lawyer didn't deliver the miracle they paid for. Jessica Fisher ended up with permanent partial paralysis. I sank into my office chair. Despite everything, I had assumed Damien had escaped serious consequences, that my sacrifice had purchased his freedom. There's more, Brian continued. Your parents lost their house last year. Medical bills, legal fees, and the civil settlement with Jessica's family bankrupted them. They're living in that small apartment complex on Westview now. Images flashed through my mind. Dad's workshop in the garage, where he taught me to build my first birdhouse. Mom's carefully tended garden, where she grew tomatoes every summer. The porch swing, where I had studied for countless exams. Why are you telling me this? I asked, though I already knew. Your mom asked about you. Wanted to know if we still kept in touch. Brian sighed. Look, I'm not saying you owe them anything. What they did was wrong, period. But it's been 10 years, Santiago. 10 years of consequences for everyone. Including me, I reminded him. I lost my future because of their choice. Did you, though? Last I checked, you're doing pretty well for yourself. Better than you might have as a doctor drowning in medical school debt. His words stung because they contained a kernel of truth. My life had taken an unexpected path, but not an unsuccessful one. They want to see you, Brian said finally. They asked me to tell you that. I'll think about it, I replied noncommittally. After hanging up, I stared at the financial models on my computer screen, unable to focus. Neat columns of projections and probabilities, so unlike the messy reality of family relationships. In my professional life, I calculated risk and return with precision. Could I apply the same analysis to reconnecting with my parents? For weeks, I wrestled with the decision. During morning runs along the Embarcadero, I rehearsed potential conversations. During sleepless nights, I scrolled through the few family photos I had kept, studying faces that had aged a decade in my absence. What finally prompted my decision wasn't forgiveness or nostalgia, but curiosity. Who had they become in these 10 years? Who had I become? Could those versions of ourselves coexist, or were we permanently fractured by the past? I requested a week of personal leave and booked a flight to Arizona. As the plane descended toward familiar mountains, I felt neither excitement nor dread. Only a clinical interest in closing a chapter that had remained unfinished for too long. Brian met me at the airport, his hairline receded but his smile unchanged. Ready for this? He asked as we loaded my suitcase into his car. Not really, I admitted. But it's time. We drove through neighborhoods that seemed simultaneously familiar and foreign. New shopping centers had replaced desert lots. Old landmarks had disappeared. The bookstore where I had worked was now a yoga studio. Change was inevitable, I supposed. For places and people alike. They don't know I'm bringing you, Brian confessed as we turned onto Westview Drive. I thought you might back out if they were expecting you. Smart, I conceded. I still might. The apartment complex was a far cry from our former home, a beige, 2-story building with narrow balconies and a small communal pool. Unit 17 was on the ground floor, its window adorned with the same lace curtains my mother had hung in our old living room. "Want me to come in?" Brian offered. I shook my head. "This is something I need to do alone." With a deep breath, I approached the door and knocked 3 times. The sound echoed my heartbeat, steady but accelerated. Footsteps approached from inside, and then the door swung open. My mother stood before me, a decade older and inches smaller than in my memory. Her dark hair had turned completely gray, her face lined with wrinkles that hadn't existed when I left. For a moment, she stared uncomprehending. Then her hands flew to her mouth. "Santiago?" she whispered, as though speaking too loudly might make me disappear. "Is it really you?" Behind her, my father appeared in the hallway. His once imposing frame had shrunk, shoulders hunched from age or illness. He steadied himself against the wall, eyes widening in disbelief. "Son," he managed, voice cracking, "you came home." Home. A loaded word for a place I'd never seen before today. But looking at their aged faces, I realized we'd all come a long way from where we'd started. Stepping into their apartment felt like entering a museum dedicated to our former life. The familiar leather recliner that had been my father's favorite reading spot sat awkwardly in the too small living room. Mom's collection of ceramic birds lined windowsills just as they had in our old house. Family photos, including several of me from high school, occupied every available surface. "We weren't expecting company," Mom apologized, hastily clearing newspapers from the couch. "If we'd known you were coming..." "It was a last-minute decision," I said, remaining standing as they both sank onto the sofa. The silence that followed was dense with unspoken words. 10 years of separation had left us without the familiar rhythms of conversation. We were strangers connected by blood and broken trust. "You look good," Dad finally offered. "Healthy." "Army life agreed with me," I replied. "And you?" Brian mentioned heart problems. Dad patted his chest. "Triple bypass 2 years ago. Forced early retirement. The doctor says I'm stable now, but no more 60-hour work weeks." "I'm sorry to hear that." The words felt insufficient, but sincere. "Would you like something to drink?" "I made fresh lemonade this morning," Mom interjected, clearly desperate to fall back on hostess duties to ease the tension. "I'm fine. Thank you." She nodded, hands fidgeting in her lap. "We've thought about you every day, Santiago. Wondered where you were, if you were safe." "I sent a postcard from Korea," I reminded her. "And Brian could have told you I was doing well." "It's not the same as hearing it from you," she countered softly. Before I could respond, the front door opened. Damien entered, carrying a grocery bag in one arm. He stopped abruptly when he saw me, shock registering on his face. My brother had aged poorly. Though only 35, his hairline had receded dramatically, and a paunch strained the buttons of his work shirt. The embroidered logo identified him as an employee of Value Mart, the discount superstore on the edge of town. "Santiago," he said, confusion giving way to wariness. "What are you doing here?" "Visiting," I replied neutrally. Brian thought it was time. Damien set down the groceries and crossed his arms defensively. "After 10 years of silence, you just show up unannounced?" "Better than emptying someone's bank account without warning," I countered, old anger flaring despite my best intentions. "Damien, please," Mom interjected. "Let's not start this way." He held my gaze for a moment longer before shrugging. "Whatever. I've got a shift in an hour anyway." He retreated to what I assumed was his bedroom, closing the door firmly behind him. "He's been living with us since he got out," Dad explained, a note of apology in his voice. "Jobs are hard to come by with his record." The apartment suddenly felt claustrophobic. 3 adults sharing a space barely large enough for one. The walls were thin enough that I could hear Damien moving around in his room, likely changing for work. "So," I said, taking a seat in the recliner, "tell me what happened after I left." They exchanged glances, a married couple's silent communication. Dad nodded slightly, yielding the floor to Mom. "We hired that attorney, Alan Richardson," she began, hands clasped tightly. "He promised he could get the charges reduced, maybe even dismissed. But when Jessica's condition worsened, her voice faltered. She's paralyzed from the waist down," Dad continued. "The prosecution had a solid case. Richardson negotiated a plea deal. 4 years instead of the potential 10, but there was nothing he could do about the civil lawsuit. The settlement was $750,000, Mom added. Insurance covered some, but we had to sell the house to pay the rest. We declared bankruptcy 2 years ago. I absorbed this information silently. All that money, my money spent on a lawyer who couldn't deliver the miracle they'd hoped for. All those sacrifices for nothing. Did you think about me at all? I asked quietly. When you were making these decisions? Every day, Mom whispered, tears gathering. We told ourselves we were doing what was necessary, what any parents would do to keep their child out of prison. But we knew it was wrong, Santiago. We knew we were betraying you. We thought we could fix it afterward, Dad added, his voice rough with emotion. Pay you back, help you enroll the following year. But then came the civil suit, the medical bills, my heart problems. He gestured helplessly at their surroundings. Everything fell apart. Damien emerged from his room, now dressed in a Value Mart uniform, complete with name tag. He paused in the hallway, listening to our conversation. I tried writing to you during my second year inside, he said unexpectedly. The letter came back undeliverable. I moved around a lot during my service, I replied, not mentioning that I had intentionally left no forwarding address. He nodded, as if this confirmed something he'd long suspected. Well, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the money, but for everything before that too. I was a terrible brother, long before the accident. The admission surprised me. The Damien I remembered had never accepted responsibility for anything, always finding someone else to blame for his misfortunes. Prison changes you, he added, seeing my expression. 4 years of looking at the same cell walls gives you plenty of time to recognize your mistakes. An uncomfortable silence followed, as we all contemplated the paths that had led us to this moment. 4 lives derailed by a series of poor decisions and desperation. We need to ask you something, Santiago, Mom finally said, her voice steadier now. And we'll understand if you say no. I tensed, suddenly understanding the true purpose of this reunion. Not reconciliation, but request. You need money. She flinched at my directness. The bank is foreclosing on the apartment next month. We're 3 months behind on payments. How much? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Dad met my eyes directly. $28,800 would cover the back payments and keep us afloat until I qualify for full Social Security benefits next year. The exact amount they had taken from me a decade ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. We wouldn't ask if we had any other option, Mom added hurriedly. We've sold everything of value. Damien contributes what he can from his salary, but it's minimum wage. I looked around the small apartment, noting the worn furniture, the outdated appliances, the general air of making do with less. They weren't exaggerating their circumstances. Yet something about their request stirred a deep resentment I thought I'd put behind me. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You took my college fund without permission to save Damien from consequences he deserved. That money didn't even accomplish its purpose. Now, 10 years later, after no real attempt to be part of my life, you're asking for the exact same amount? They had the grace to look ashamed. Even Damien studied the floor, unable to meet my gaze. When Brian told me you were struggling, I came here open to reconciliation, I continued. I thought maybe time had changed things. But this I gestured between us. This feels like history repeating itself. It's not the same, Dad protested weakly. We're asking, not taking. And if I say no? If I walk out that door without writing a check? What then? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. We all knew what would happen. Eviction, further downsizing, perhaps even homelessness for my aging parents. Damien checked his watch and grabbed his keys from the counter. I've got to get to work. Some of us don't have the luxury of philosophical debates about family obligation. His words were bitter, but his expression, as he glanced at our parents, was genuinely concerned. After he left, the apartment felt even smaller. Mom wiped tears silently, while Dad stared at his clasped hands. The weight of their expectation pressed against me like a physical force. No, I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. I won't give you the money. Mom's sob broke the silence. Dad's shoulders slumped further, defeat etched into every line of his face. I understand, he murmured, though clearly he didn't. Neither did I, entirely. I had the means to help them. The amount wouldn't significantly impact my finances. Yet something deeper than vengeance held me back. A recognition that some patterns needed to be broken, not reinforced. I should go, I said, standing up. This was a mistake. As I moved toward the door, Mom's voice stopped me. We love you, Santiago. Despite everything, we've always loved you. I turned back to face them, these diminished versions of the parents who had once seemed infallible. I know, I replied honestly. That's what made the betrayal so painful. With that, I stepped outside into the Arizona sunshine, carrying the weight of their disappointment alongside my own unresolved feelings. The conversation had provided no catharsis, no neat resolution to our complicated history. As I walked away, I realized that saying no wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about finally acknowledging a truth that had taken me 10 years to understand. Some debts can never be repaid with money. I made it halfway to Brian's car before turning around. The satisfaction I had expected from refusing their request hadn't materialized. Instead, I felt hollow, as though I had just perpetuated the same cycle of hurt that had driven us apart a decade ago. When I knocked on their door again, Mom answered immediately, eyes red but hopeful. Dad stood behind her, surprise evident on his weathered face. Can we talk again? I asked. Really talk this time. They ushered me back inside, clearing space at their small kitchen table. 3 mugs of coffee appeared, a domestic ritual that felt both foreign and familiar. I'm not giving you the money, I began, watching their expressions fall once more. But not because I can't, or even because I'm still angry about what happened. Then why? Dad asked. I took a deep breath, organizing thoughts that had crystallized during my brief walk outside. Because it wouldn't solve anything. It would just be another temporary fix in a pattern that's defined this family for too long. We don't have many options left, Mom pointed out gently. You do, actually. You just don't want to consider them. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. This apartment is too expensive for your current income. Damien is 35 years old and still living at home, contributing minimally. You're trying to maintain a lifestyle that isn't sustainable anymore. Dad's expression hardened. So what are you suggesting? That we live on the street? No. I'm suggesting you sell what's left of your possessions, find a smaller place that fits your actual budget, and require Damien to either contribute equally or find his own housing. The words came easier than I expected, and I'm willing to help with that transition, just not in the way you're asking. How? Mom asked, curiosity tempering her disappointment. I work in finance. I can help you create a realistic budget, negotiate with creditors, and find affordable housing. I can connect you with resources for seniors. What I won't do is write a check that perpetuates patterns that have hurt all of us. Dad leaned back in his chair, studying me with new awareness. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between enlisting and earning my finance degree, I replied with a small smile. Life didn't stop when I left home, Dad. I had to figure things out on my own. Columbia University, Mom murmured. Brian told us. We were so proud, Santiago. Are so proud. The praise still affected me, I realized with surprise. After everything, their approval still mattered. Tell us more about your life, Dad requested. The real version, not the highlights Brian might have shared. So I did. I told them about the discipline of military service, the friendships forged during deployment, the challenges of returning to academia as a veteran. I described my apartment in San Francisco, my role at Westfield Capital, my carefully constructed new life. What I didn't mention was the loneliness that sometimes accompanied my success. The holidays spent with colleagues rather than family. The achievements celebrated alone. Some truths weren't productive to share. As I spoke, Damien returned from his shift, pausing in the doorway when he saw me still there. His expression was guarded, expecting another confrontation. Your brother has a proposition, Dad explained, gesturing for him to join us. I outlined my alternative again, a practical approach to their financial situation rather than another bailout. With each detail, Damien's expression grew darker. So basically, you want me to move out, he concluded when I finished. That's your solution? Kick me when I'm down? No, I corrected him. I want you to stand on your own 2 feet for once. There's a difference. Easy for you to say. You don't have a felony record making it impossible to find decent work. There are programs for ex-offenders, I countered. Job training, placement services. I've researched them. His laugh was bitter. Of course you have. Always the perfect son, with all the answers. Damien, Mom interjected, Santiago is trying to help in a sustainable way. By forcing me out? Some help. He stormed toward his room, then turned back suddenly. You know what? You left. 10 years without a word. And now you're back playing financial advisor? You abandoned this family. The accusation stung, but I maintained my composure. I left because my future was stolen from me. By you, by them, by choices. None of you bothered to include me in. And now I'm offering a way forward that doesn't involve theft or abandonment. Take it or don't, but don't pretend you're the victim here. Boys, please, Mom pleaded, the familiar refrain from our childhood arguments. But we weren't boys anymore. We were men shaped by our choices and circumstances, facing the consequences of paths taken and not taken. I made mistakes, Damien admitted, after a tense silence. Terrible ones. Jessica will never walk again because of me. I served my time, but that doesn't erase what I did. His voice cracked slightly. And what happened to you was wrong too. I knew they were taking your money. I could have stopped it. The admission hung between us, unexpected and raw. Why didn't you? I asked, genuinely curious. He shrugged, the gesture painfully honest. Because I was scared. Selfish. Because it was easier to let them sacrifice your future than face my own consequences. Another silence followed, but different from before. Something had shifted, a long overdue acknowledgement that had been missing from our earlier interactions. So what now? Dad finally asked, looking between his sons. Now we make a plan, I replied. A realistic one that addresses the actual problems instead of applying temporary bandages. Over the next few hours, we did exactly that. I reviewed their finances, identified areas for immediate change, and outlined steps toward stability. Dad agreed to contact the Veterans Affairs Office about benefits he'd never applied for. Mom would look into part-time work to supplement their income. Damien, after initial resistance, acknowledged that living independently would be better for everyone. I can help you find an apartment, I offered him. Something affordable, but decent. Why would you do that? He asked warily. After everything? Because breaking cycles is harder than continuing them, I said simply. And because despite everything, you're still my brother. By evening, we had a workable plan. Not perfect, not immediate, but sustainable. I committed to returning in 1 month to help them implement the changes we'd discussed. Not out of obligation, but choice. As I prepared to leave, Mom hugged me tightly, her frame smaller than I remembered, but her embrace just as fierce. Thank you for coming back, she whispered, even if just for today. I'll be back, I promised, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Dad shook my hand formally, then pulled me into a brief, awkward hug. We're proud of the man you've become, he said gruffly, even if we can't take credit for it. Damien walked me to the door, maintaining a careful distance. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I am sorry for everything. I know, I replied, and somehow, after all these years, I did. The reconciliation wasn't complete. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend in a single conversation. But as I walked away this time, I felt lighter. The anger I'd carried for a decade had begun to transform into something more nuanced. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. A year later, much had changed. My parents were settled in a senior living community that matched their budget, with activities and support services they'd never had before. Dad's health had improved with proper medical care and reduced stress. Mom had found purpose volunteering at a local elementary school. Damien had struggled initially with independent living, but eventually found his footing. He'd joined a support group for ex-offenders and secured a better job through one of their employment programs. Our relationship remained complicated, but no longer hostile. As for me, I had learned that healing doesn't always follow the path we expect. Sometimes, it requires saying no to protect others from their worst instincts. Sometimes it means offering solutions rather than money. Sometimes it means acknowledging that family ties can be simultaneously broken and unbreakable. The $28,800 that had once defined our family's fracture now seemed almost insignificant compared to the cost of 10 lost years. No amount of money could have purchased the growth and perspective that time forced upon each of us. In the end, My parents never received the exact sum they had taken from me. Instead, they got something more valuable. A son who returned not out of obligation, but choice, who helped them build sustainable independence rather than temporary relief. And I discovered that true freedom came not from financial success or distance from painful relationships, but from breaking the cycles that had defined us. From recognizing that sometimes saying no is the most loving response possible, both for others and for yourself. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between helping someone in a way they wanted versus what they truly needed? Or perhaps you've been on the receiving end of a no that ultimately proved more valuable than the yes you were seeking? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your way forward after betrayal. Remember, sometimes the most important boundaries we set are with those we love the most. Thank you for listening, and may your own journey toward healing be guided by wisdom rather than resentment.